So good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you for coming out. I know this is a early breakfast session. I appreciate everybody getting up, and I know a few folks might have been out late last night, and so I particularly appreciate those who rolled out of bed on a very little sleep. So I have four lovely ladies here up with me, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, especially after becoming a mother of a daughter, women in technology, and kind of introspecting a little bit on what the industry is like and what we can do to make it more friendly for all. I think diversity is really important across the board, whatever kind of diversity that is, and having a forum like this offers us not only the opportunity to have these lovely ladies as role models for all of us, but also to talk about some of the things that we see and what we can all collectively do to create a very friendly environment and technology for everybody to be participating, men, women, and other demographics. So with that, I'm going to let each of the ladies introduce themselves, tell a little bit about the role that they're in right now, and a little bit about their background, and then we'll dive into a couple questions.
Hello, on? Yeah, I'm Mary Holstege. I work at MarkLogic as a server developer for the last 13 and a half years. Can you hear me? No? Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I've been just a developer forever, since getting my degree at Stanford, nominally in artificial intelligence, but right before the first of the AI winters, so that didn't go a whole lot anywhere. Now it would have been great, but and I've always been interested in women in tech, just because I've always been demographically challenged. There was 3 of us in my class at Stanford, and we all knew each other and shared the secrets. And then, she said, I have a daughter, and she wasn't in tech. She was history, but now she's in tech, so it applies to her too.
Hi, I'm working with the World Bank. My name is Denisa, and I'm currently a senior IT officer with the data management group. I don't consider myself purely IT. I'm more like a data management. I'm a data management a professional, so I'm a little bit different, I feel, because in my field there are a lot of women. So, my background is really social sciences. So, we'll talk more about how I end up being here, but that's where I am now.
My name is Amy Brown. I'm Director of Enterprise Architecture at Pearson. I have always been in tech. I live in Denver right now. I'm originally from the Chicago area. When I went to school, I selected a computer science degree in the College of Business. The focus was on statistics. Who knew back then that big data was going to become a thing, because at the time the web was really what it was all about. So I pursued a track in application engineering and subsequently moved into architecture. Things I pay attention to at Pearson, I lead our content architecture strategy. I'm responsible for our API platform, and I'm also driving forward with Web 3.0 UX architecture strategies.
Hi, my name is Ann Johnston, and I run a bunch of development teams at Credit Suisse, and I also am in charge of data for wealth management. So I was a Java developer for a long time, always demographically challenged, and I think the diversity of all types is really important. It was. I think it's too bad that there are actually fewer women computer science graduates, and even the ones that I run into have actually sort of left the field. So I think that it's important to talk about this topic, about how we can make women more comfortable, because I think it's a great career.
Wonderful. So I know for myself, I'm kind of an accidental technologist. I was given an opportunity from my father to attend the college of my choice, so long as I got an engineering degree. That was the condition. Or I could go to University of Maine Orno, which is a fantastic school, but also my home school, and major in whatever I wanted to. So I chose to get an engineering degree and go someplace out of state, away from my parents. But I think it's always interesting, for folks who have come into the industry to kind of like take a look at how they got there. So I guess maybe can you share a little bit about, how you decided to go ahead and get a PhD, which is, an incredible commitment.
Crazy is the word you're looking for. So my undergrad degree was not computer science at all. I was linguistics and math, or math and linguistics, if you know what my Twitter handle is. And I was going to school in LA, or in the LA area, and it was way too hot and way too smoggy, and I could not take it. But in the computer lab, it was always cold, and it filtered out the smog. So I was spending a lot of time there, and that is actually how I got into it. And they had a program at my college. It was a wonderful program at Pomona College where students completely ran the computer center. So there was the manager of the computer consultants, all the consultants, and the system programmer. And so I was actually going to be the system programmer. But then I got an NSF grant to go to Stanford, so I went to Stanford. And I think it was one of those things where I just really wanted to learn all I could about it, and that seemed like the right way to do it. In retrospect, that was a terrible way to do it, but I'm glad I did it. It was a good experience at Stanford in the main, except by year 7 I was pretty sick of it. But.
So Denisa, you have a very interesting comment, which is coming in more from the business side of things, but obviously you're heavily involved in technology, you're involved with our implementation. So you want to tell a little bit about how you ended up in that space?
I mean, in a sense, I think I did my graduate school in political science and sociology. So when I was looking for a PhD, I looked at public policy because it was more interdisciplinary, and that's what I was interested in. And amazingly enough, there were 2 schools. It was GW and I was just talking to my colleagues last night, and UMass, Boston and Amherst. And I decided to go to GW mostly because of the weather in Boston. I hated it. After 3 years in Boston, I mean, that's one of the main reasons, but not the. But anyhow, so the program in GW was more was public policy and was in School of Business. So it was really an interdisciplinary program and a lot of focus on use of IT for development. So since I'm coming from back then a developing country, now it's a middle-income country, Romania, I was very interested, how to use. So and it was so in 2000 was really the cool stuff was so, and I got more interested into that. And in the meantime, I started working with the World Bank, which was across the street, and in the World Bank, where I got involved at the beginning was data management. So that just happened, honestly. It wasn't really, clearly I wasn't interested to do development or to do anything. I was more interested on the business side, the business process, engineering, data management. But the data management, the work part just happened, was really a pure accident. And I just stayed there because I was doing my PhD across the street, and it was just convenient, and then I just grew into the. But I think my primary area where I work, what my job pays me is really data management. That's what I've done for the last 17 years, which is interesting because, it's really, I truly believe that technology, and I have a lot of arguments with my colleagues in the technology, you can build systems. If the data is crap, who cares, honest, Right. But I think the area that I have also developed in Bara, which is much more in line with my initial interest, was working with governments in our country, so doing operational work, and really help them doing IT advisory more like McKinsey and all of these guys are doing, but in a different way, because our interest is much more different. You really want to ensure that when they implement an IT system or they are trying to standardize their business processes, let's say in the Ministry of Finance in a country, you are really ensuring that it's in standard with the policies that the bank is recommending on the IMF. So that's, you can call it business process, or engineer. It's really the area that I'm the most interested in, and I think it's very much in line with my education. And data management is something that I grew into it. So that's
interesting. And at what point did you decide that you had a major in computer science, right?
Yeah, so my undergrad degree, I guess through high school, I knew I would participate in any sort of programming competitions. I'm like uber competitive. I grew up in sports, and then in high school, I remember programming in BASIC and having extracurricular activities, staying and competing against other people in programming competitions. So I knew going into college, I really didn't have any doubt. But the big question for me was whether I wanted to go to the College of Engineering or the College of Business. And so I didn't, I looked into business, and I was really fascinated, I think, around information flow and how it was driving the bottom line of businesses. So it was really cool, but the curriculum was based on statistics if you went to the College of Business, and lots of programming. But I also had a lot of like operations management, and those problems are super fun to solve. And finance and accounting and economics, and so it was good. It was a really good fit. And at the time when I was going to school, not too many schools offered that path through business.
Yeah.
I mean, now they do it today. So it's been really great. But I don't have more of an interesting story because I kind of knew early on, and I never really wavered.
Well, I think it is really interesting the way you said, like, you're a competitive person and you were playing sports, and then you could find that you could be in programming competitions, right? So there's like that nice little hook about, kind of scratching that itch to, have that.
And I'm always all about the hackathon these days. If you work for a company that has a hackathon, I'm like, I'm in.
Oh, that's great.
So I actually think I'm a good example of why girls don't choose to major in computer science. I grew up. I did not lack exposure to computers. I grew up in Palo Alto. My dad was in the industry for years. I was always the top in math. I was at all the math competitions. And those boys that I was competitive with, now they're professors of computer science at Stanford, and they key developers at Facebook. But when it came for me to major in something, I first went to college being like, I don't want to hang out with a bunch of geeky guys. Maybe I'll try something else. So I actually was a paleontology major at first, but then I got my first job when I was a freshman, and they were like, okay, it's data entry. And within a week, I had gone home and coded all that you had to do. And I was like, wow, I think I'm in the wrong major. So it's kind of interesting that, if I had been a boy with my same exposure and my same background, I would have automatically chosen computer science. But it actually took me a while to realize that I had to, my life was with, fighting that stereotype and dealing with, being the only girl in the room. And I'm not sorry, but I did avoid it at first. So I think that that's a good way to, tell your daughters that, just embrace it, right? It is a great career.
No, that's a great point. So I guess in terms of, once you get into the workplace, in some cases, the demographics are okay, but in a lot of cases, it's you're one of a very few in a larger environment. Are there situations that you've had to take a step back and say, how do I stand out? But how do I stand out in a positive way that's not based on your gender? Are there situations what you guys would like to share about that? Go ahead, Mary.
So I've spent most of my career at really small companies, right? Employee 14, employee 20. So I'm always the only woman except for the receptionist. And, I try not to think of things in gendered terms. So I just sort of get on with my business and try and be, reliable and creative. I would spin your question around a little bit. Sometimes I've used it to my own dark advantage, right? There was a time I was doing due diligence for VCs, and it's amazing. You dress in beautiful dresses with your high heels, and the boys instantly assume you don't know anything. And they will spill their guts and tell you all kinds of stuff they ought to tell you, right? So I'd ask these very naive questions about their technology, and they'd just reveal all the things about how it didn't really work. And so that was sort of a plus of being the only girl in the room.
That's wonderful.
I think for me, not so much in the bank, because I think I was lucky. Even so, most of the IT is male. We were lucky the last two CIOs were women, and they really promoted gender diversity. And I think the bank as a whole is very different than many private sector organizations. But I do feel it when I go to developing countries in missions, when most of my counterparts are male, either Arab countries or Eastern Europe, which this is mostly where I've been. And there things haven't changed, so I think it's not so much being in IT as it is more with some of these cultures that are still very male-based. And in this country too, this country is too. The only difference is that here men don't show it to your face, so they show it behind, so that's, so anyhow, so that's, but as I said, I think I'm lucky. Bank is a very diverse, environment, and that makes a huge difference.
So I was laughing because I swear to God, every time I go to the Verizon store or Apple store, I know the going assumption is that I have no idea what I'm doing with my phone or what I'm looking for, and that happens repeatedly. It's not really funny, but it's kind of funny to play the game. So I don't like to make gender a thing. I just want to be part of the crew, and I don't have too much of a problem at work. But back to the hackathon team idea. We do sponsor hackathons at Pearson, and I do promote all-girls teams, and we have one, and it's super cool, it's super empowering, and it's to make a statement that we're here, we're relevant, and we can be successful.
So, I definitely think you get a lot of attention, and sometimes, you don't want that attention, right? And it's about, especially when I was younger, I was not very comfortable with the attention, and I think that I look back at myself and I wish I'd be like, just go with it. I remember when I was a part of the fixed income IT team at Morgan Stanley, we were, 25 people, I was the only woman, and I was, building the pricing engine, I was doing the most complicated work, and, on a daily basis, my boss, who was also a woman, she was great, I would get, so the head of the fixed income department would like you to fix his login for his server. He seemed to forget his login every day. And I would come in and be like, but I'm not the Windows Server login girl, I'm the Java developer girl. And he'd be like, no, go over there, get some exposure. And I'm like, but that's not the kind of exposure I wanted, right? And that made me very uncomfortable. And I did not, go talk to him and be like, I don't have a clue about your Windows Server login, but I can tell you about your, the pricing of your corporate bonds. So you stand out. You always get the interview. You don't get the job necessarily, but you do. Oh, we got the token woman. And I don't, and that made me uncomfortable. But, it is something that is positive, that if you're able to play on it, it can be good for you.
So I had to smile as you guys are talking about these stories. I travel a lot right now for business, and I was boarding a flight last week to Paris, and they call you up based on status, or if you're traveling with small children, or people who are disabled. And so they call up the entire group, and I walk up, and the woman kind of does a double take at me, and she looks and she goes, "Disabled?" And I'm like, out of the three, I clearly don't have a child, but I guess I didn't look like I had the status either. So that was her best guess, was I must have been in the disabled category. So anyways. Mentorship is really important. It doesn't matter if man or woman or anything like that. But I think it's unique in an environment where to all of your point, you kind of stand out sometimes in a way that you may or may not be comfortable. You can use it to your advantage in some cases, but sometimes you're just getting the attention because you are standing out in a crowd as being unique. How do each of you go about identifying mentors, and what role have those mentors had in helping you navigate the landscape that you're in? And I guess we'll go ahead and start at the end and work our way this time.
I'm sorry, say it again. Yeah.
Yeah. Which we can go ahead and start with you. But in terms of mentors, how do you seek out mentors, and what role have they had in your career?
Well, I think mentors are very important, but I also think that it should be more like, I like that term sponsor better, because it needs to be somebody who's giving you, has enough exposure to you that they can give you feedback, and you need to seek that out. And it can be difficult, right? Especially, if when as a younger woman, I would have lunch, if I have lunch with a managing director on a regular basis, they might think something different versus my colleague who's a guy. But those relationships are very important, right? Because they give you feedback about what you're doing, and you just come into the work world a blank slate. You don't really know how to get ahead. So I think you need to go and seek out people who do have some exposure to your work, and so they can direct you in the right way.
So I haven't ever really been part of a formal mentorship program, but I definitely seek out inspiration. I watch other leaders, those that I am inspired by, that I want to follow, that I want to be modeled, I want to have model after. I try to create relationships with them. I try to create more opportunities to see them navigate through really difficult situations. And fortunately, I mean, in a lot of times we're in a male-dominated field. It is the men. It's totally fine. I mean, we all face challenges, and just watching people rise up and overcome some challenges in a positive way is great. So, just my advice is be aware, look for those people, find opportunities to continue to be inspired by them. And then, as a side, my boss's boss, who's our CTO, is a female, which is super awesome. And a couple times my boss has encouraged me to do a skip level and meet with her and talk to her about some of the challenges I'm facing. So I've been really lucky. I've been surrounded by really motivational people in technology. Oh.
I mean, I think mentorship is very important if you mean it, but, basically on both sides. And I think I was lucky enough when I was a student in Romania to have this opportunity. So we had this professor that established a research center. So he really took 2 years to mentor us. And actually, he's my husband now, but back then he wasn't. But I think, and really truly mentorship, I mean, in the sense that you really spend the time as a mentor to invest in that person and get feedback, and, both at the working level and the personal level. And I think things have changed now. I mean, I truly believe in that, and I think a lot of the people that work for me now are young. And I make sure that they are young, that they are men or women. I mean, it doesn't matter. But I think things have changed because our life as a professional, we are very busy, too busy. I mean, stress, whatever it is. You really cannot put the mindset that you need as a mentor to, So I always feel that I'm failing on that. But I think also the younger generation are on the run. So they are also not interested, and I think generationally you can see a shift. I think on both sides, but I truly believe that if you do it the right way, it has a huge impact. I mean, I'm a perfect example of this. I remember 20 years ago I went to a conference in Cluj. Ramona, I couldn't even speak. I couldn't say one word. And just showing, I mean, having a group of people, and it's not only one-to-one, it's really being part of a group and having a mentor or a group of mentors to shape you and to give you the opportunities moving forward is important. And we do have formal mentor programs in the bank. I don't feel, again, they are as effective as they should be. And as I said, the main reason is, I think let's talk more on our side, people are just too busy. I mean, and we just don't put the care that we used to, and that's really unfortunate, I think. I don't know about other organizations, but...
So how much of, because you have the formal mentorship program, how much do you think that's the organization's responsibility to set up those mentorship programs versus the individual's responsibility to go seek out a mentor that's appropriate for them at that point in their career?
I mean, honest, maybe I'm being now a little bit... honest, if in the end of the day you don't find, regardless how you do it, either to a formal or through, I think you have to have on both sides the interest, and if you don't, and the passion. If you don't have it, then it's really useless. I mean, it's not useless, of course. You still gain something. That's one of the things that always one of my professors was saying. Schools in this country, but also in Europe and other, they are not educating, they are training you. The same is with mentoring. You can transfer information, but you don't really build that person up. And I think that's what is missing. So I really don't think it's about being formal or being informal. Maybe the main difference is if it's formal, the mentor or the other, they get a plus, and maybe it looks good on their resume, but so what?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think there's sort of three aspects of this. There's having someone you can get honest feedback from, and that's like the hardest thing. And no disrespect to my bosses, but they don't give you that a lot of the time. The other thing is having someone who kind of has your back and sort of will, sort of when you've accomplished something, will actually let it sort of be known more widely. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is, at those moments of despair, someone who says, no, I've been there, everyone feels that, it will be okay. And for me, I've sort of been more on the other side of that. I go to Grace Hopper a lot, and most of what I do there is I just spend time in the student lab, talking to these poor kids, right, who are sort of like, oh my God, I'm in my 6th year of my PhD, I don't know if I'm ever going to finish. Like, let me tell you about it. It's going to be okay. I have had some really wonderful bosses who've had my back. I mean, including through some just, awful situations where people have been trying to steal my work, right, and sort of take credit for it. And they've sort of stood up for me and said, no, that was Mary's thing. And I think it's good to have that when those situations arise. But in terms of an actual sort of someone to mentor me or a sponsor, I don't think I've really had that, and I've felt its lack, so I think it is important.
So earlier you were talking about how you're subscribed to all of the support cases, and you've got this constant stream of information coming at you. We all have, you talked about having 2 children, and you've got this, everything that you do for the server product. How do you manage your work-life balance? Are there any tricks that you can share with everybody in the room?
Is my boss listening? One thing I've learned, and it took me a long time to learn it, honestly, is when I go home, I'm home. And, I may read my email, but the work is done. Now is family time. And I think you really have to draw some bright lines for yourself that way. And the other thing, honestly, is I'm a demon about time management. If you send me an email at 10 in the morning and you don't get an answer till noon, that's on purpose. I don't read email except in the morning and at noon and before I go, because otherwise it's just a constant distraction, right? And it's easier to sort of do it in bulk. And it's amazing how many crises resolve themselves in those 2 hours without you responding instantly. So you don't really need to respond instantly. But yeah, those are my 2. Time management, draw the line.
Lisa, do you have any words of wisdom for folks on how to keep their head above water?
I mean, I think, it's difficult to say. I think once you have a child, I remember growing up, I never understood my mother or, in my culture, women staying home, taking care of their children. I said, you have to, come on. Once you work so hard to be where you are. So I had a child later in my life, and I could see that once you have a child, if you really want to be there, you cannot really do work. No, not really. I think it's whoever thinks, we all think that we can, and I'm doing it, but it's not the same for the child, and this is really obvious. I think I'm lucky because my husband stayed home, and he's a stay-home dad, and that makes me feel better, let me put it this way. It takes my guilt away, but it doesn't take away the fact that I really didn't spend as much time with my daughter as I should. So I think all of this, I don't know. I think it's, as a woman and as a mother, it's a continuous battle, I think, for all of us. But in terms of work-life balance, I have to say I don't manage it very well. You know, I have an addictive behavior with these gadgets. I'm always online. So how do I disconnect? You know, and now I do because my daughter takes my, you know, iPad away and say, "That's it, Mommy, you are home," and that's done. So how do you deal with that? I think it's a personality issue more than anything else, and how. So I don't know. I mean, it's a challenge, and I'm facing it every day, and I feel guilty every day for my daughter. So that's, you know, I don't have a good advice, honest.
But that's just as important, I think, for everybody else to hear that it's hard, right? Because it is.
Yeah, I don't think I've completely figured it out either, but I think time management is key. Both my husband and I work full time. Usually on Sunday, we look at the week and we say, what meetings do you have? We have a schedule, but he'll have meetings and I'll go to conferences. So we have to look at the week, figure out where the kids need to be and who's going to get them there. I do work a lot during the week. My day starts early and it goes into the night, but I turn it off on the weekends. That's my dedicated family time. But I agree, and there are times when, you know, we have a collision as good as we try to take care of this, and I say, well, I have a meeting. Well, how are the kids going to get to school? Well, mine's really important. Well, so is mine. And so then we lean on friends, and friends lean on us, so it works out.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. I think, you know, we wouldn't all still be in the workforce if we weren't, you know, fighters into type A and a little bit competitive and perfectionist. And, you know, I've learned that a lot of the only way I can even have work-life balance is accepting that, you know, some things aren't going to be perfect and I have to ask for help. And, you know, and I see some women go down the trail that they want everything to be perfect. You know, it's your child, right? And you're going to put all your resources in it. And I see them criticizing their spouses a lot about, oh no, you don't know how to feed the baby. And one of the things I was like, well, fine, you can do it. That's fine. I wouldn't do it that way, but you can make the lunches. I don't really like but you know what? I'm not going to, you know, I just ask for help. Things aren't going to be perfect. And, you know, and I invite him to do everything. And he's been a great partner. I've been lucky in that. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think I feel it's very reassuring to me to hear you guys say that you haven't found the magic combination, because I know it's a day-to-day struggle for me as well. I want to ask you guys one more question, then open it up to the audience. So if you guys are thinking about questions, go ahead and start kind of formulating those. If you could just tell folks one thing about what they might be able to do to make the workforce in your environment more inclusive, what would that be? And if you have 2 or 3, well, you're allowed to do that as well. You want to go ahead and start?
Sure. I think one of the big challenges when you're in any type of minority, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's gender or race or whatever. It's hard to make connections with people, right? I mean, if you put me in a party right next to somebody just like me, I'm going to have lots to talk about with them. But if you put me right next to a party of somebody from around the world who's a different gender, I won't know what to say. So, and enjoying your job, being successful, finding opportunities, all of this stuff is connections and relationships. And when you don't have that same gender as them, it's hard to do that. So you really have to figure out, you know what, if it's going to take 10 awkward coffees to get along with that coworker, you're just going to have to do it to find and create and establish that relationship, because relationships are everything. It's everything about your day. It's everything about your future. And as a manager, you also have to realize that best teams are diverse teams, and you need to figure out how to put the most diverse people together, and you need to figure out how to engage them to a goal and get them to work. Because you know what, if everybody's the same, they're going to create crappy products. You need different people to create the best products, and those people need to talk to each other, and they need to argue, and they need to fight, and they need to come with the best solution. So it's up to all of us as managers to create that environment where don't hire the people just because they're like you. You need to hire people that are not like you. And I challenge myself every day to be like, it's easy to hire someone just like me, but I need to hire different people and create diverse teams and create an environment where everybody feels like their opinion matters.
I'd just like to say, you know, if anybody's ever listened or saw YouTube videos or attended TEDx conferences, you've started to educate yourself and be informed around behavior and language. And for a lot of women, inclusion is a really gray area. You're not sure if whether it's a real issue or if it's a personality or a culture difference, and it's a really scary, I think it's a really scary place to be, to raise a topic. But I encourage women, at the onset, if you feel like there's something there and you feel like you're not being included, and go to your boss, have the conversation, and please meet that person. If you are a manager, meet them with sensitivity and awareness. Don't meet it with insensitive language or turn it into something that might be perceived as a stereotype, as an emotional issue. It's wanting to be treated equal as everyone else. So I work for an education company. I say get educated, learn how to deal with these situations, and women, don't be afraid. It's real.
I mean, I really don't have a good answer. It's challenging. I came from a very male-based society, which I still think is, like Ramona, I will ask you to comment on this. As I said here, when I came in '97, I felt it wasn't, but it was hidden. So I think we are where we are. I was lucky enough to be in an organization which did have formal policies on diversity. So that's amazing. However, you have to be very careful because like everything else, you start on one side and then you end up on the other side. So you end up to replace one criteria with something else, and then you end up with a diverse workforce. They are not good at what they are doing. So I think, maybe these younger generations, and it's also not only diversity in terms of gender, but also, race and ethnicity. So the bank is very diverse. So I'm very lucky. I never felt that. But if you go in my country or in other, areas, I think that's an issue and will always be an issue. I think the younger generation, not only my daughter generation, but even maybe, yes, 10 years, this age, they don't see that. And I think maybe that's going to be our luck, because they don't see color, they don't see gender differences. I think they've been so much gadgetized that they don't, which is bad, but they don't see that part. So, there is so in terms of now, I don't know. I mean, personally, as you said, I try not to look at that. Even so, I do know that my male counterparts in many cases, or they may be better perceived in terms of opportunities than I have, but I ignore it and just move on, and that's it. I mean, you just have to ignore it and move on. I don't think there is much you can do, honest. Okay. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm...
But that's probably, part of it.
Yeah, I would say... I would kind of echo what you said, is diverse teams are valuable. I mean, I think diversity tends to get talked about too much as sort of like, oh, well, it's the right thing to do. And it is the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. People think about software all wrong, is what I say. The most important attribute of a software developer is empathy for the customer, not some technical skill. And if you're hiring for technical skills, they don't know anything about what to build. And that's the important part. So hire people who have diverse ideas about what to build, and you'll end up with a better product. And the second thing I would say is a shout out to Project Include. It's a website, and they have tremendous detailed advice for various phases of handling this problem, from sort of getting girls interested in the front end to more established companies figuring out their act, and it's a fabulous resource.
That's great. Okay, so does anybody have a question, and we'll find out why I should not be throwing things.
So the last question was a great segue into my question. So although I think my team is already good at the fighting and arguing part, I'm trying to hire a pharmaceutical sales rep, right? So my extended pod, your people, Mark, Mike, Damon, David, Monica's people, all these guys who both ironically work for women, all men. I got 5 men on the healthcare side. I've got Nellie. So I've got an extended pod of like 20 people, 1 woman. And I said to the recruiters, would love to see some women because I definitely believe that in that diversity. And I'm going to go upstairs later and interview 3 more people, maybe the 7th, 8th, and 9th candidates, all men. So what can you do, what can I do to get that sort of, I can't hire a woman if, and like Mary said, I'm not going to change my criteria,
Right.
but I need to see them. So how do we
Well,
see
that's
more
why
of that?
we're here, right?
Right.
To put a face on women in technology, to say we're here and inspire other women to just get out there.
Yeah, we really have it. I mean, there's Julie, we have the women sales leaders, but I'm not seeing the pipeline of people that I can help.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about is different people will react to your job descriptions differently. And women in particular will look at your list of nice to haves and say, if I don't meet 90% of them, I'm not appropriate for this job. And if you start talking about rock stars and that kind of stuff, it turns off a lot of women, right? And so there's actually tools now. You could say, let me run my job descriptions through this and flag it for the kind of language that's going to turn off different demographics. And I'd start there.
And we need to encourage women not to feel defeated when they see those
That too.
ads. I mean,
Yeah.
really, go for it. You're qualified, you're capable. That's the thing. You're exactly right.
And I had a manager call me actually because we had a gal we just hired in, and we were staffing her on his project. And he called me. And he goes, "She just told me the three things that were worrying her about this project." And I go, "So?" He goes, I don't think I can put her on the project." And I go, trust me, this is going to be okay. I said, this is the difference between managing men and women. She's going to tell you the three things she's worried about. The guy's just going to be like, this is great because I've got it, right? They've got that confidence. And it turned out like a week later, he called me back and he's like, she's the best consultant I've had work on a project for me in the last year. Like, this is amazing. And it was totally that issue. Though what I would say is go check out the new consulting job recs, because we just invested a lot of time in rewriting ours to try to make them say things like you might have and then give a list rather than saying, requirements and then giving a list, so that people would more think along of, oh, if I have 6 of the 10, then that would be okay for me to apply. Because we'd rather interview them and figure out if they're the right person than have them self-select out. Anyone else want to add to the conversation?
I think we could all do more. I could look at myself to encourage women, so I think that we have to start in more grassroots.
Hi, great panel. The question I have is, you were talking about groupthink a little bit. You were just touching on it. Can you give an example of where diversity in team, and it doesn't matter what the diversity was, it could be all women with one guy or all men with one woman, that diversity of team created a better mousetrap or better solution. Can you give an example?
I have a favorite example, which is, so I'm a sports fan. I watch a lot of soccer. And if you watch soccer now, they'll give these stats. So-and-so ran 10.2 kilometers and touched the ball 32 times. And you go, how did they do that? Well, they have trackers. And for the longest time, they could not figure out how to attach these trackers. It's like, shall we tape it to their back, have it on a lanyard? That's not going to work. And then they had a woman on the team, and she said, guys, it's a sports bra. So they're all wearing sports bras now. But it was like obvious.
Fantastic.
I think also from my point of view, as I said, I'm not a developer, never been interested to be. But I think what it really makes a difference, that's what I'm a little bit, like in my country where computer science has a history, Eastern Europe, the government did encourage at the macro level policies to ensure the women are in computer science and they have the necessary, but a lot of them are not interested. So it's just a matter of, I think of your skill set, and your interest, regardless if you are a man or a woman. But where it does make a difference, when you build, a system, as I mentioned to you before, like the team that I have now on the search program, I have the developers are male from different countries, and the data management and the business, the user engagement and the communication are mostly women. All of them are women, no male. Just by the nature of the field, I think. But the team is great because they complement each other, and because it complements the actual product. When you are doing when you're building a system, you have to take a look at all of the aspects, from the user, engagement, the data, the business processes. So if you take a holistic view, then that's where a diverse team makes a huge difference. Until now, when people build systems, at least in my organization, because I haven't been exposed, were mostly IT developers build a system and then put it there and then something else. So there wasn't so much attention in my organization to all of these other aspects. So I think that's where it makes a difference. It just happens, as I said, because I think the data and the business analysis area is more woman field, then that's where the diversity is. But I do want to change my mind on something. Where I feel that in IT, and I'm including IT, all of this data management, everything that is where in IT it does make a difference that you are a woman is when you move up. When you move up, I think there is still. And I've heard this from my colleagues, from my PhD colleagues, that they move in different groups in private sector in this country or in Europe. If you are not, as a woman, aggressive enough or very tough, will be very difficult to move up the. And I'm curious to hear from you. You are a VP here. Does it really make a difference? I mean, the argument they are making is that IT organizations are still very male. Is the bodies group. So how do you ensure that you are able to, so I don't know. In my organization, I don't see this, but private sector seems to be a pattern. Maybe I'm wrong.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that applies to everybody. I think to move up, and we were talking about the job recs and why we're not seeing as many women apply for jobs. I think that whether you're male or female, a high degree of confidence is gonna be what gets you believe in yourself, and so I don't know if there's I don't think women. My own opinion is I don't know that the behavior needs to be different between men and women. I think to move up the ranks, you have to be a go-getter, you have to have initiative, and you have to be confident.
I do think there's sort of this relates to some data on women in our field drop out more the further they get in their career, right? And that's not true of other industries. And I don't know why that is. I think there's some aspect of, again, differential response to situations, right? And some of it from the women and some of it from their bosses, right? Men get promoted for their potential and women get promoted for what they've accomplished. It tends to be true. I don't know what to do about that. It seems to just be what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a bunch of time recently kind of looking at things like performance management systems. There are certain, and this is not unique to gender, but there are certain traditional performance management systems that tend to cater to people who are like the person who's reviewing them, right? Because they remember things similarly to how they would have behaved. And so when you go and you do something like an annual review, and they're trying to think back retrospectively across a period of a year, they remember the things that they related to personally. And so you end up with these biases that, for whatever reason, that cause problems. So that's one of the things that we've personally been looking at, or I've been personally looking at for my organization, is trying to move more to a 360-degree review system and doing it more periodically, like as it finishes a distinct activity, capture the feedback just in time so that when you go and take a step back in the year, you've got that just-in-time feedback. So those are the kinds of things that we're exploring, and those aren't just trying to be driven to respect all the diversity that we have. We have people in 10 countries right now in the consulting organization at MarkLogic. So there's a lot of diversity that we can take advantage of. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to be more opinionated, even when I used to sit back and be like, oh, I'm going to wait for all the facts, right? I don't know. Wow, that person has an opinion. They must have a lot more facts than me. But, yeah, it's not easy. You have to learn how to be more aggressive, and I do see that less women are aggressive. I have tons of opinions now about things I probably don't know anything about. and I'm going to voice them just so people know I'm here. And I tried to change how I dress. Yeah, it's constant, right? And I think that giving people that feedback and having them listen is important for us so that we can continue to see people going up the ranks. Yeah.
We have any other questions? Okay, I don't know how we get the A to B. There we go.
We're not throwing it anymore.
I guess.
Great panel, by the way. I have more of a personal question for all of you. Is there a woman that inspired you? And if that's the case, why? Somebody that inspired you to be who you are today and to have the job that you have?
This is going to sound really sappy, but my mom. Now she raised us a lot of the time alone because my dad was off traveling. But she came from a technical background, and she was always very insistent that all her children should know some basic things, right? How to cook, how to change a light bulb, how to rewire a socket, how to change, how to do those basic things, what she considered basic things. And I think she just never took any nonsense from anyone, and I think that encouraged me.
I mean, for me, it's difficult to say, but I think in terms of my work career, not so much personal, I remember, I think I was lucky. I was probably doing when I was in Boston, so this was like 98. So I was just beginning, I was very young, beginning of my career. So I did my summer internship back in Boston, which was still around back then. And my manager was this woman from Pakistan, a really tough lady, wonderful lady. And I felt somehow, if I look back, that, and this was in IT actually, this was my exposure to IT. And I felt that that was maybe an impact on me in terms of, I've always kind of compared all of my managers, men and women, with her. And I think because she had the combination of being tough, having empathy, and also being able to put passion in her mentorship. I mean, we were a group of interns. And I don't think I've ever had a woman manager like her and I had a lot of them. So yeah, I would say her, yes.
Yeah, so definitely the toughness, the perseverance, I give credit to my mom as well. But I really draw, I'm so aware, I'm always looking, no matter where I'm at, I'm drawing inspiration from different people, whether I'm at a conference listening to someone speak, or whether I'm in a class, or whether I'm at work. I'm always observing and in tune with what I'm hearing, what people are saying, and I try to just take that with me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't think we have enough women role models in senior leadership positions. So, and that's one thing I saw is that I felt like, for men, we would have there are lots of different types of successful people. And then I feel like we're still changing as women. You only see the aggressive women, right? You see like fewer models of success, and that's challenging. But I agree, getting inspiration from various people. Honestly, one of the reasons when I finally did change my major to computer science, I had read a book about a woman who was a computer genius who like went around the world, and I was like, wow, maybe I can do it, So, it can come from all places, and hopefully we can, create different models. There are lots of different models of successful people, and we don't have to just think that everyone has to be one way. And that's too bad that we don't have enough women models.
Thank you. Other questions in the crowd? Any more questions? Oh, okay. A couple, got one in the front.
Ready?
Nice catch, Damon.
That's a good throw. So I'm wondering, have you seen, is there sort of a tipping point in an organization where a certain number or way of participating from women doesn't change just the way each individual woman can participate, but changes the dynamic of the team and the nature of the whole enterprise? Have you been in like some places where there's more or less, or there's a change, and you said, wow, that made a big difference?
I mean, our previous CIO, she was a woman, and she did have a policy, which, when she joined, and actually she was interviewed, I think, last year, our organization was mostly male South Asia IT organization. So, except the archives and the library, which they are mostly women. So I'm putting that, aside. And she did have a policy to, in terms of purposely hire women, so any job, basically, there was a prioritization for. And I think that now we do have more women at the management level, but also the working level, interns, for example. And I do see a change. Yeah, I do see a change. Just the fact that you go into a room and it's not mostly South Asia male, and you see, it makes a big difference, I think. But I think the areas in which they were brought in was, as I mentioned, more, of course, management, project management, business analysis, data. So that's where the complementarity comes. But yeah, it's much more colorful. The work, I'm just joking, but it's definitely much more colors in the dresses and just the difficulties. So that makes a difference.
But,
yeah.
but the level, it's very different when you walk into a room. But how is it different? What was brought by that shift, besides obviously the dress? But what did it do?
So it's difficult to say. This has happened in the last 2 years. So, but I think. It's kind of hard to say that this is cause and effect. But I do see that, at least in my field, in my area, because a lot of these women that were hired were in business analysis and data management, I can see a little bit more care to, when you release a system, paying attention to, does it really make sense to use, or do the user actually use it? So it's difficult to say if it's because the women were hired, or is it because the change in the I don't know. At least in my team, I can definitely see, and I hired these people, so I do see that, but that's because I'm hoping that's the case, so we'll have to see.
So I have a story. I've been with Pearson 9 years. A few years ago, so we have a CEO, CIO, and then several CTOs that report to the CIO. And there were some changes at the CTO level. So the CIO brought in different CTOs. One of them is a female. She's my boss's boss. Within the first year, massive restructuring, massive leadership changes, big effort to deal with operational efficiencies, swift changes. At the same time, another CTO came in to run another part of the org to change. We're in an age of change. It's clear that's the direction. Like the Pearson's education was publishing, moving away from the textbook, competing with giants like Amazon, Microsoft, LinkedIn, things like that. Real big change in the landscape. Company needed a reboot, and the other CTO didn't make those swift changes, wasn't as aggressive, and was gone in a year. So in my experience, and it sort of goes back to earlier conversations, what I've observed is those women that are making it up to the top, they are aggressive, they do take initiative, they are no nonsense, they are about the business. And this is my own experience, so others might have different experiences. But I've seen women at the top in technology work a lot more swiftly than I've seen some of their male counterparts. So that's my own experience at Pearson. I think, unfortunately, for the people that were impacted by the restructuring, it's not a positive story, but I think it was needed for the company. I think we needed fresh perspective, and so. Anyone else?
Yeah, I want to get you sort of talked about percentages and how they change, right? I think what I've observed is that meetings with closer to 50% women or more, sorry guys, they run a lot better. Because I think what happens, especially our kind of humans, we're very argumentative, technically passionate people, and it's really easy for men of that ilk to just run over the conversation. And I think women, even women of that ilk, and I know I'm that way too, I can run over conversations with the best of them, are at least a little more willing to hold back and let someone else have a say. And I think the net result is usually a better outcome. And you know, one of the most humiliating experiences of my life was I was at a company and we did one of these training exercises. It was the, you know, the crash land in the desert, rank these things. And I ran over that conversation and led us out to die in the desert. And so it was a good lesson for me to try and remember to be a little humble and listen to other people who were actually saying the reasonable things. And I just think that's more likely to happen when there's more women in the room.
Interesting. Yeah, I think for me, honestly, the demographics start to shift it too. Because if you're it doesn't matter what diversity kind of equation I think you're looking at. If you're the one of in a room, like when you go out and you say something, you feel pretty exposed because you're already a unique bird. It does, you know, into anything you're going to say. So just putting one more person in the room starts to help, and then as you get to 50%, then that's great too. But you know, kind of like having fun.
Hardly ever happens.
Yeah. Let's start with having one more. Any other questions? I think we have one more. One over there. I don't know if we're going to throw or hand that. Throw it. I know.
Hi, I have a question about confidence, I guess. So I'm young and I'm starting out, and often when I get an opportunity, I think, oh, like they're taking a chance on me, or I got lucky, and then I step back and I say, no, actually, I have the skills for this. I am the best qualified person for this job. And I was wondering if that kind of low confidence was a thing that you have struggled with, and if you had strategies for dealing with it.
So yes, I think it's fair to say we've all struggled with this. I have this great story I saw just recently from Neil Gaiman, who is a fabulous writer. And he was at some gala event with all of these luminaries and discoverers and stuff, and he says, well, you know, and I was looking around, I thought, I don't belong here. You know, I just write stories. So he was hanging in the back, talking with this nice older gentleman about, you know, they had the same first name, blah, blah, blah. And the other guy said, you know, I don't belong here. I just went where they sent me. And Neil Gaiman says to him, yeah, but you were the first human on the moon, so there's that. So I think everybody feels this, and the key is to find a community where you can express that safely. And for all women in tech, I would say Sisters Rules. Join it. SYSTERS.
Maybe I would say early in your career, find a place to shine. Find one thing to be really good at and evangelize it. Put yourself out there, make yourself feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's your skills and your confidence will build over time. But if you're starting out, find the one thing that you can be really good at and promote it.
I think, I mean, from my side, I have to say that, and I don't know how to say it politically correct, so it doesn't, but I do feel that me, like when I was your age, I was younger, I also felt I'm not good enough. And this has a huge impact on terms of when you apply for a job, when you negotiate your wage, because you don't, while your male counterparts do. And I think there is publication and research, you know, about that. So if I will have to say, if I will be now 25, I will start again, I will definitely make sure that, but I don't know. I mean, so I don't know if this is a woman thing, that we are much more a perfectionist, I think, than our male counterparts. My former boss, and he's American male, they said, I mean, I don't understand, I'm hiring these ladies, and they never negotiate. I don't understand what's going on, while the male counterparts do. So, of course, this is just his personal, you know, experience, but I think it's not so much to negotiate, but it's the confidence. So how do you, even now, I mean, for me, if I will have to start new again, I'll probably also think, am I good enough? Is this really my perfect, you know, fit? You know, could I do better? So I don't know. I really don't have a good answer for you.
So you
Yeah,
just
so
reminded
maybe-
me about the power of negotiation. So our neighbors are salespeople. They have young kids. They just ordered 1,000 fidget spinners from China. So the kids have been walking all around the neighborhood trying to sell fidget spinners for $5. My kids are 7 and 9, and so we go online to Amazon.com. We say, what's the price of a fidget spinner? You can get them for $3. So then we start looking at the ratings and reviews, and I tell them, do you want to pay $5 for a fidget spinner? Do you want to go on? And these are good friends, so I told them, you know, you're teaching your kids how to sell. I'm going to teach my girls how to negotiate. And so we go to Amazon, and we can't get the fidget spinner for 2 weeks, because clearly they're still sending them from China. So then I tell my kids, do you want to wait the 2 weeks, or do you want to pay the $3? And they're paying out of their own bank, because I'm not spending the money on the fidget spinner. So really early on, I think, for men and women, encourage your kids how to be confident. So they went back and they said, I'll pay $4. And the kid didn't know, the little boy didn't know how to handle it, and he said, no, I don't want $4, I want $5. So then we come back, and my daughter said, he won't take our $4. So visited Grandma, and Grandma said, oh, the new rage is fidget spinners. I got the kids, too, so they're not having... And she didn't know the story, so the kids don't have to pay for fidget spinners. They waited long enough, and Grandma caught on to the trend, and so now they're getting fidget spinners.
Do we have any more questions in the audience? I'm going to pass the, I don't know if we're throwing it or are we passing this? Throw it. Yeah. Nice.
So I'm a manager, and I struggle with the same recruitment issues, but I was very struck by your discussion of work-life balance and trying to draw those bright lines. So one of the approaches I've taken, I'm fortunate to work for a company that has very, I'd say, liberal work-life policies, a lot of leave time and such. So one of the approaches that I've tried to take is with all my employees, to tell them, if you've earned this vacation time, if you've earned the personal time, you take it. You're being a martyr isn't going to get you ahead in my book. And I guess the thought in the back of my head is that if I really try to enforce that with my male employees, that maybe it does take some pressure off of all of my employees who might be struggling with some of that work balance. I don't know if I'm talking smack or not, but that's kind of the theory that I have around that. And I don't know what your thinking on that is. I mean, how much is policy and how much is the manager trying to encourage all the employees to kind of model this behavior and try to put everybody more on an even playing field?
I mean, I think you have to have the policy in place because, at the bank we do have different alternatives, work schedules and things, but then they do give the freedom to the manager to make the decision. And it really depends, I think, the bank is very diverse. Managers from different cultures, they all come with their own kind of background. So I personally feel, and that's my personal approach, and I'm doing it with my team, within the policy, that you have to give the freedom to all of your employees, either work from home, do alternative work schedules, leave earlier. I don't care if it's 9 to 5 or 9 to 2, or give as much freedom as you can. The problem is the balance, and it's a challenging one because while we are a global organization, the bank, we have offices in more than 100 countries. I don't believe that video conferencing or telephone really works all the time. You have to have the face-to-face to really make things happen. So even if I'm very flexible, you can do, or I said, as long as you give me the product, I don't care how you are. But you do have to have them on the ground, to be able to work on something. So how do you find this balance? So it's very challenging. So I think a lot of organizations are facing this, like my colleagues from the International American Development Bank, they also have a policy in which they're more structured. They say 1 day a week, every person can work from home, and you choose it so you can kind of overlap. So that's better because you find a little bit of more structure, around this. So you make sure that you have one day that everybody is in the office and you can discuss things that has to be discussed, face to face. But I truly believe that the 9 to 5 time, it's gone, and I think a mobile workforce is the way to the future. But I also am aware of the limitations. I mean, I said I hate VCs. Drives me completely nuts. You cannot get anything done. So I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think you do need to have policy, but I also agree with you that it has to be leaders not essentially punishing people for using the policy. And I think part of that is actually encouraging everybody. You see this where there's, family leave policies, but somehow only the mothers take it and the fathers get punished for it. And that's not good for fathers either, right? And so I think, my way of looking at it is all like curb cuts, right? Yeah, they were put in place for people in wheelchairs, but they benefit everybody. So, be the guy championing curb cuts, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah, the one thing I would add to that is, from my perspective, it's not just encouraging people to take the vacation, it's facilitating them to have somebody cover for them. So I know when I'm trying to go out on vacation, that tends to be my biggest struggle, is how do I have coverage while I'm out such that I don't have to worry about that. And so that's one of the things that I try to work on with my directs, is if they want to go out and have a vacation, who's going to cover for what's on their plate. And that's uniform across the board, because it's one thing to say go take vacation, but they're like, but all this other stuff has to happen, and so you have to